Today's created world is the world of Godzilla. Today's guests are the people who run a well-known website called Toho Kingdom. What is Toho Kingdom, you ask? Toho Kingdom is a website that covers all aspects of the Japanese film company Toho Eiga. The site provides tons of information on the films, DVDs, comics, and much more related to Toho Eiga's productions. It is quite popular for providing information on the very famous Toho movie series, Godzilla. Please welcome Mr. Anthony Romero, Chris Muirhanger, and Thomas Fairchild. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Good to be here.
So first of all, could you describe about yourself and how you came about to start Toho Kingdom?
Sure. So by profession, I'm a product marketer, but I own the website Toho Kingdom, which I started back in 1999, and it was actually my third website.
Okay.
But the first one I really took seriously, and early on I kind of knew the vision for it was something that I wanted to be much more exhaustive, much more challenging to myself, where I wanted to encompass essentially everything that the film company Toho Eiga does.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a pretty lofty goal, and I took kind of three inspirations in terms of why I took that approach. All of them came from pretty different mediums. One of them, oddly enough, was the video game Godzilla Monster of Monsters for the Nintendo Entertainment System. And this one, as a kid, the reason why it caught my attention is because it has a huge kind of roster of characters. You have some usual suspects like Godzilla, Mothra, Mechagodzilla, etc., but also some fairly obscure characters like Ghidorah, who comes from the 1970 movie Space Amoeba. You've got the giant spaceship from the film The War in Space in 1977. And these films are totally unrelated to Godzilla, at least at the time. And so as a kid, I was always curious, what these things were. I had a real thirst for knowledge, so I'd go to libraries and stuff like that. And eventually I come across a book that, in this case, it actually showed Ghidorah in his own film. And that kind of spurred my interest that, there's, more films outside of the Godzilla kind of universe, so to speak, that Toho was doing. So that caught my interest. A more direct inspiration was Mark Lockwood's website called Godzilla Tohotopia, which was focused on Toho science fiction in general. It was a great website. Sadly, it went offline back in early 2000, pretty shortly after I created my own site. And the third one, interestingly enough, was Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai film from 1954.
Right.
And the reason why this one was inspirational is because at the time I thought that my interest was just in the science fiction films that Toho was doing. But it's such an incredible movie that I realized that if I was going to do a website, I really wanted to encompass everything that Toho did, not just the science fiction stuff. It was certainly a lofty goal, but that's kind of how I came to it in terms of inspiration. And so when I started the site in 1999, it was on free hosting. So it's kind of common for a lot of sites of that era, kind of like fan pages, where it's just a few dozen websites. But eventually it became too big in terms of the traffic we got. So in 2002, we graduated, so to speak, to paid hosting, which was fairly expensive at the time. And it was intimidating for me because at that point in my life, I was just out of high school. So it felt like, kind of making the next plunge, but I was serious about the website. It was something I wanted to do. And around that time, we also expanded where it was, prior to that, just myself doing it. I started to take on other staff members who were helping me out. And since then, it's been 2 decades later, we've grown from just a few staff members to over a dozen at this point in time. And we've got a lot of key members, like Joshua Sudomersky. We've got his brother Andrew. We've got Tyler Trishak. We've also got Chris Muirhanger. And all of these people are really kind of instrumental, the whole staff, in kind of doing the daily updates we do. But it's really been a passion project for a lot of us for a long time now.
I'm Chris Muirhanger. I'm the site director / media relations of TohoKingdom.com. Well, Toho Kingdom is, for everybody involved, just like a hobby, but it's the hobby that blew up, got really big. For myself, I had just come off a couple of projects. I was shooting a documentary, finished that up, and then I did a quick project with a friend of mine, and then was just looking to kind of relax for a while. And I had heard about, I have a friend who is, really into video games and everything, and invited me to go to E3 with Electronic Entertainment Expo, And it's like in 2004, and there was a new Godzilla game being shown off, and I got in contact with Anthony on Toho Kingdom, no affiliation whatsoever. I said, hey, if I go to this thing and film off the screen and stuff to show people what the game is like, because there's nothing else out there, would you host it? And he said, sure, yeah, okay. I don't think he believed me. And so I went to the show and I filmed it, and various little bits of gameplay and everything. And the game was like just in a little kiosk and was only there as a favor. It was only 50% done. So, and the person running the kiosk was just like, here, just film whatever you want. I came back, I chopped the clips up, and I sent them over to Anthony, and he was surprised to, I think, actually get them. And he was so happy with what he saw when he put them up on the website. And this is 2 years before YouTube came out, or actually was invented or whatever. He put them up on the site, and they were so popular that it crashed the site 8 times. It almost got kicked off its host, so I almost destroyed Toho Kingdom with that before I even started, And then from then on, it was just kind of like wanting to do more for the site. A lot of it is just, there's a little bit of just kind of mistrust for mainstream media, because I always hear like the cardboard buildings and, sweaty guy in a suit, and as a fan, that's not true, and you kind of get tired of hearing it. So my whole thing is like, well, let's go to the source of the people who make these things and talk to them, because I always felt the fans kind of get locked out a lot of that stuff. So,
well, I am a proud husband and father living in the Seattle area. After working in public education for over a decade, I'm now studying to become a full-time software engineer. Additionally, I run a YouTube channel called Kaijutopia, where I make stop-motion videos, usually Godzilla-inspired. I joined Toho Kingdom in 2003. For a number of years, I wrote mainly kaiju stories for what's now known as the KWC today. Stands for Kaiju War Chronicles. Nowadays, I'm Toho Kingdom's videographer. I publish videos and tutorial lessons on how to make your own Godzilla movie.
Awesome. So what's your most favorite Godzilla movie?
So I didn't even have to hesitate, because my favorite Godzilla movie is actually also my favorite movie of all time, which is Godzilla vs. Biollante, which came out in 1989. And it made a huge impact on me the first time I saw it, which was back in 1992 when it first came out to home video here in the United States. And the reason it made such an impact is, some of the reasons are superficial. I will say that the special effects for the time were great. I still think they stand up today. So that was kind of the superficial element, that it felt like a more robust, more kind of mature, so to speak, Godzilla film for the time. But I also love the creativity in that film. There's a lot of ideas that are kind of jam-packed in. And if you kind of dig into the process, it makes sense, because there was actually a story contest, and there was a lot of different ideas that all kind of ended up in this one film. But it allows it to do a lot of different approaches. Like, it introduces this idea of, genetic engineering. It introduces this new monster, Biollante, where it's actually kind of got a hokey premise when you think of this idea of combining genetically, roses with Godzilla cells, and somehow that creates a monster. But the film takes the approach in such a serious way that it really kind of pays off. And I'm always impressed that they took a concept where, at the surface level, it does sound kind of silly, but they've done it in such a way that it's kind of really credible on the screen. And I also do like Biollante a lot as a monster. I think it's a great premise where she has her rose form, and it seems not too intimidating, and it's not much of a challenge for Godzilla. And then you have her final form, where she is larger than Godzilla, very threatening. And I always like that kind of juxtaposed between those two forms as well. But that's absolutely my favorite film, and one that I can pretty much watch anytime and always enjoy it.
Right.
The favorite that I have is Godzilla vs. Gigan, and that one is just something I would see a lot as a kid, and just something that whenever it came on, it was like a real event,
I don't think it's kind of like asking a parent, like, hey, who's your favorite kid? I don't think I'll ever have a one above all favorite Godzilla movie. But currently, if I had to pick, I would choose, I think, 2001's Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, which is GMK for short.
Next question, that could be the same movie or different one, but is there any movie that you particularly recommend to Godzilla beginners?
So if I was going to make a recommendation, it would probably actually be Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, which is such a long title. But that one came out in 2000. It is. It kind of just keeps going there. But that one came out in 2001. That one is one of the better films, generally kind of regarded as one of the better films by a lot of people. And the nice thing about that one is that it doesn't have a lot of continuity. It's kind of a fresh start to it. So it's something that somebody who hasn't seen the other films, they can just kind of jump in and get the gist of it right away. Mm-hmm. So that's one that I kind of recommend to beginners, because you also get the spice of a lot of different monsters in there as well.
Well, it depends on like the age range. You know, if it's a younger child, or the legendary ones are a good place to start because they're kind of more general. Teenage or pushing into 20s, I'd say start with the first one, work your way forward. If you're just a little kid who just wants to see monster fights, then yeah, there's primarily the legendary ones. I mean, the Godzilla vs. Kong especially.
Oh man, okay, this one I can do. For Godzilla beginners, I'd recommend Invasion of Astro Monster, Godzilla vs. Biollante, and 2014's Godzilla.
Okay, great. And did you think Godzilla was a superhero when you grew up?
So the first Godzilla film I ever saw was King Kong versus Godzilla, the 1962 film. And in that film, Godzilla is the villain. And I'll be honest that as a kid, it actually didn't make a big impression on me. The second film I ever saw was The Return of Godzilla, aka Godzilla in 1985. And in this one, Godzilla is absolutely the villain. There's no mistaking it. In fact, there's some scenes that you can classify as maybe a little terrifying for kids. And again, this one didn't also kind of click with me as a kid. The third film I saw was Godzilla vs. Gigan, the 1972 film. And in this one, Godzilla is heroic. And I actually credit that fact that he is a heroic character as being part of the reason why, as a kid, that this was the film that actually made me a fan of the character. Mm-hmm. And in that film, it's Godzilla and Anguirus. It's kind of a tag team versus King Ghidorah and Gigan. And me and my sister, we were watching it, and a little naively, we kind of assumed that Godzilla was going to lose because he didn't seem as powerful. But just that dynamic of seeing multiple monsters going head to head, and Godzilla being a heroic character kind of stood out with this idea that it was kind of a heroic monster, which seemed like a novelty at the time. Mm-hmm. So that's what kind of drew me to the franchise initially. Mm-hmm. And I will say that as a kid, I probably gravitated more toward those films where he was a hero. But I started out watching two films where he was a villain. One that took place in the 60s, one that took place quote unquote in modern times for me in the 80s. So I always had that frame of reference that Godzilla was something that was sometimes a villain, sometimes a hero. And my methodology as a kid was that he can be whatever the story needed him to be. So I didn't really kind of grow up thinking he was heroic, even though I kind of enjoyed those films as a kid where he was more the hero.
I see.
Yes and no. I mean, you knew when you were watching the movies if the bad guy monster would start messing stuff up, then Godzilla was on his way for sure. Superhero, I didn't really think of him like that. It's just something. He was just this force that was going to come take care of the bad guy.
And what's Godzilla to you?
Well, the whole thing is you're taking a suit that is an inanimate object, and you're bringing life to it. And to me, it's kind of a lot of creativity, so to speak. You're concocting a story and everything around this, this character, and making it interesting, and how you're going to do that. And there's many different ways, and I don't think every way with Godzilla has been discovered yet.
Yeah, as a kid, I thought Godzilla was a superhero. I would definitely rank him up there with like Superman, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man. He was a hero to me.
Awesome. So I know it's a superhero, but what specifically Godzilla is to you? What Godzilla means to you?
Yeah, that's what I think. That's what makes Godzilla unique, especially when it comes to pop culture icons, is that he can represent many things at once to different people. I mean, he could be a bad guy, but he could also be a hero. He could be like a protector of sorts, or just like a metaphor. I mean, he'll always be like Godzilla is and always will be a nuclear metaphor, but he's evolved since 1954. To me, in my own words, I think Godzilla represents change. And if Godzilla can do it, we can too.
I see. So you asked that question because the superhero kind of still sounds a little vague because it could be like a cool or metaphor for you or inspirational or that's why I wanted to ask the question. But thanks for the answer. Next, we have more exciting materials to show you all. Stay tuned. Wait, there's part 2. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel.